Imagine you wake up and the fire is gone. Not the physical fire burning in the center of the camp, but the one inside you. Your limbs feel like lead. The thought of picking up a spear or foraging for roots or even speaking to the people sitting right next to you makes you physically nauseous. You don't want to eat. You don't want to move. You just want to roll over on your furs and disappear into the darkest corner of the cave. Today we call that depression. And today when that heavy, suffocating blanket of apathy drops on you, you can call in sick. You can close the blinds, turn off your phone, order food from a screen, and vanish from the world for a week. But 50,000 years ago, there were no sick days. If you didn't forage, you didn't eat. If you didn't keep up with the group when it was time to move, you were left behind. And out there, being left behind meant death. So, what did a prehistoric human do when their brain completely betrayed them? The answer to that question changes everything you think you know about ancient survival. And it might completely change how you view your own mind. For a long time, we pictured early humans as ruthless survival machines. The weak died, the strong lived, end of story. We assumed that anyone who couldn't pull their weight was simply left for the wolves. But human biology tells a completely different story. You have the exact same brain as a human from 100,000 years ago. The exact same neurochemistry, which means they felt the exact same crushing weight of depression that you do. Biologists have actually debated this for decades. If severe depression makes you stop moving, and stopping means dying, evolution should have bred it out of us completely millions of years ago. A trait that gets you killed doesn't get passed down, but depression survived. It is hardwired into the human genome. Why? In 2009, evolutionary psychologists proposed something called the analytical rumination hypothesis. They argued that a depressed mood isn't a malfunction, it's a defense mechanism. When an ancient human faced a massive, complex problem, maybe the hunting grounds dried up, or a rival group moved into their territory, or a harsh winter was coming and they weren't prepared, the brain forced the body to stop. Depression literally steals your energy for physical tasks, so your brain can redirect all of that metabolic energy into intense, obsessive problem solving. It pulls you away from distractions. It makes you isolate so you can think. In the ancient world, a period of severe depression might have been the exact thing that forced someone to sit quietly by the fire for 3 days, analyzing a failing strategy until they invented a better spear point or figured out a new migration route that saved the entire group. But what happens when it goes beyond problem solving? What happens when an ancient human just breaks down completely? The archaeological record actually gives us an answer, and it is incredibly beautiful. In the 1950s, in a cave in Iraq called Shanidar, archaeologists found the remains of a Neanderthal man they called Shanidar I. He lived around 45,000 years ago, and his life was brutally hard. He had a crushed left eye socket, meaning he was partially blind. His right arm had been amputated above the elbow. He had a severe limp, and his ear canals were blocked, meaning he was profoundly deaf. In a world of apex predators and constant movement, Shanidar I was completely helpless. He could not hunt. He could not carry heavy loads. He could not hear a cave lion sneaking up behind him. By all the brutal laws of nature, he should have died in his 20s. But the bones tell a different story. Shanidar I lived to be around 50 years old. He survived for decades after his injuries. You don't survive for 20 years with one arm, a bad leg, and no vision in an Ice Age wilderness by yourself. Someone chewed his food for him when his teeth wore down. Someone guided him when the camp moved. Someone protected him. And he wasn't the only one. At a site called Dmanisi in Georgia, they found the 1.7 million-year-old skull of an early hominid who had lost all his teeth years before he died. He literally could not chew the tough, fibrous diet of the time. Someone had to have been mashing up his food every single day so he wouldn't starve. If ancient humans were willing to carry the physically broken for years, they absolutely carried the mentally broken. When someone fell into a deep depression, the tribe didn't leave them behind. They compensated for them. They covered their shifts. They kept them warm. And here is the ultimate irony. Today, if you go to a doctor for severe depression, before they prescribe anything, they will usually give you a list of lifestyle changes. Get out into the sunlight. Exercise every single day. Fix your sleep schedule. Spend more time interacting with friends in person. Eat whole, unprocessed foods. We call that a rigorous treatment plan. 50,000 years ago, that was just called Tuesday. Ancient humans couldn't stay inside a dark room because inside was a damp cave. And you couldn't stay in there all day without freezing. They were forced into the sunlight. They were walking anywhere from 5 to 10 miles a day just to survive, releasing a constant stream of endorphins and regulating their nervous systems. Their circadian rhythm was perfectly synced with the sun. When it got dark, they slept. When it got light, they woke up. Their entire existence was perfectly engineered to prevent the modern depressive spiral. But the most powerful tool they had wasn't sunlight or walking, it was the fire. Modern depression thrives on isolation. It convinces you that you are completely alone, that your brain is broken, and that nobody understands you. In the ancient world, isolation was practically impossible. You lived your entire life in a group of 20 to 50 people. Your nervous system was co-regulated by the people breathing right next to you. At night, everyone gathered around the same fire. And around that fire, there was a physical closeness that we have almost completely lost today. Primates groom each other to lower heart rates and release oxytocin. Early humans almost certainly did the same thing, touching, leaning on each other, picking parasites out of hair, sharing food, weaving string together shoulder to shoulder. That constant, quiet physical contact sends a biological signal directly to the brain that says, you are safe, you belong. You couldn't sit alone with your dark thoughts because someone was always right there. Of course, the biggest trigger for depression back then was the exact same as it is now. Losing someone you love. Child mortality was devastatingly high. Hunting accidents were common. Life was incredibly fragile, which means grief must have been a constant, suffocating presence in every ancient group. So, how did they cope with that kind of psychological trauma? They invented ritual. In a cave in Spain called Cima de los Huesos, the Pit of Bones, scientists found a single, beautifully crafted pink quartz hand axe carefully placed among the remains of 30 ancient humans. It's roughly 400,000 years old. It wasn't a tool that had been dropped by accident, it was a conscious, deliberate offering. At the Sungir burial site in Russia, a 30,000-year-old grave holds a man covered in 3,000 individually carved ivory beads. Each bead took an estimated hour to carve. That means someone, or an entire group of people, sat by a fire for 3,000 hours just to honor one dead man. They didn't just dig a hole and move on to the next hunt, they poured their grief into art. They took their pain and made it physical. Ritual gave their psychological suffering a shape. It gave them a process to walk through together so nobody had to process the weight of the world alone. We tend to look back at ancient humans and think their lives were miserable, brutish, and short. We assume that because they didn't have modern medicine or comfortable beds, they must have been suffering constantly. But when it comes to the human mind, they might have been far healthier than we are. When an ancient human got depressed, they didn't have to explain it. They didn't have to hide it to keep a job. They didn't lay in bed scrolling through the perfectly curated lives of strangers on a glowing screen, wondering why they felt so incredibly empty. Their brain hit the brakes, and the tribe simply slowed down with them. Their lifestyle naturally treated their neurochemistry. Their community absorbed their weight. So the next time you feel that heavy, familiar darkness creeping in, remember that you are carrying a survival mechanism that is hundreds of thousands of years old. Your brain isn't fundamentally broken, it's just reacting the way it was designed to. The only difference is that 50,000 years ago, when your internal fire went out, there were 30 other people sitting around you in the dark, ready to share theirs until you could find your spark again.